There was always something off about my childhood, a feeling that I was an outsider in my own family. My parents, John and Grace, were kind and loving, and my older brother, Daniel, was practically my best friend. But no matter how much I tried to fit in, there was this nagging doubt, like I didn't really belong. I tried to brush it off as just being the quiet one, the introverted brother in a family full of extroverts. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't really belong. We lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone's business. My parents ran a little bakery that had been in the family for generations. It wasn't a gold mine, but it kept us comfortable. As kids, Daniel and I used to help out on weekends, learning to knead dough before we could even tie our own shoelaces. It was simple, but it was ours. Last month, we celebrated Dad's 60th birthday. The bakery was packed with friends and family, and Mom had baked his favorite double chocolate cake. During the party, I noticed an elderly woman in the corner, watching us with an odd look on her face. I didn't recognize her, so I asked Mom about it. "Oh, that's just Aunt Margaret. Distant family from your dad's side," she replied, dismissing it. But something about the way she said it made me uneasy. Later that evening, as I was helping clean up, Aunt Margaret approached me. She smiled warmly and said, "You've grown so much, Lucas. You look just like your father." It seemed like a harmless comment, but the way she hesitated before saying, "Father," caught my attention. I thanked her and brushed it off, but the thought kept gnawing at me. The next day, I asked Dad about Aunt Margaret, but he seemed irritated. "She's a bit of a meddler," he muttered. "Doesn't know when to keep quiet." He wouldn't elaborate, and I didn't push it. But curiosity got the better of me. I decided to dig around a bit, starting with old family photo albums. One evening, when my parents were out, I found the dusty albums in the attic. There were dozens of pictures of me and Daniel as kids, family holidays, birthdays, and those awkward school portrait shots. But one photo caught my eye. It was an old black and white picture of my mom, Dad, and a baby, but the baby didn't look like me or Daniel. The date scribbled on the back didn't make sense either. It was from a year before I was born. My pulse quickened. I flipped through more pages, looking for any clue. Then, tucked behind another photo, I found a hospital certificate. It wasn't mine or Daniel's. It was a birth certificate for a baby named Lucas Adam Miller. But the parents listed weren't John and Grace. They were someone named Thomas Miller and Rebecca Adams. I felt dizzy. My heart pounded as I stared at the names, my own name at the top. What did this mean? Was it a mistake? A joke? I didn't know what to think. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. Why would my parents have this? Was I adopted? Did they lie to me my entire life? I heard the door downstairs open. My parents were home. Panicking, I stuffed the certificate back into the album and shoved it back in the box. I needed time to process this before confronting them. That night I couldn't sleep. Aunt Margaret's words kept replaying in my mind. Could it be true? Was I really living a lie all these years? The thought made my stomach twist with fear and anger. I couldn't believe it, but I couldn't deny what I saw either. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind kept spinning, replaying Aunt Margaret's words and that photo. Had my whole life been a lie? I wanted to scream, but all I could do was lie there stunned. The next morning, I went through the motions at the bakery, but I couldn't shake the hollow ache in my chest. My family wasn't really my family, or at least, not in the way I thought. I needed answers, but I couldn't just barge in and accuse my parents without proof, without more information. So, I did what any rational person would do. I turned to the internet. At first, I didn't know where to start. I typed Thomas Miller and Rebecca Adams into a search engine. But nothing useful came up. Frustrated, I decided to look through local birth records online. The problem was that, without knowing their ages or any other details, I kept hitting dead ends. I was about to give up when a thought struck me: Aunt Margaret. She had acted strangely at the party, and she was supposedly from Dad's side of the family. If anyone knew the truth, it might be her. I called her number, feeling my heart pound in my chest. After a few rings, she picked up. "Hello? Hi, Aunt Margaret, it's Lucas," I said, trying to sound casual. "Oh, Lucas! What a pleasant surprise. How are you?" "I'm okay. Listen, I just wanted to ask you something. It's about the party." She hesitated. "All right. What's on your mind? Why did you say I look like Dad? I asked bluntly. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she sighed. Lucas, I think we should talk in person. Can you come by my house? Her voice sounded heavy, like she was carrying a secret too big to share over the phone. I agreed to meet her after work. The rest of the day dragged on painfully slowly. I kept stealing glances at Dad, wondering how he could keep such a secret. Did Daniel know? Was I the only one in the dark? I felt betrayed, but I also felt a strange guilt, like I was about to open a door that should have stayed closed. When my shift ended, I made my way to Aunt Margaret's house on the edge of town. Her small, cluttered living room smelled like lavender and old books. She offered me tea, but I couldn't touch it. I just needed answers. She sat down across from me, her eyes sad. I knew this day would come, she whispered. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath. Lucas, I've known you since you were a baby. But not in the way you think. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She looked at me with a pained expression. You're not John and Grace's biological son. The words hung in the air like a bomb had just detonated. I couldn't breathe. What do you mean? I stammered. Your birth parents were Thomas Miller and Rebecca Adams. They were friends of John and Grace. When you were born, there was an accident, a car crash. You survived, but they didn't. I felt numb. My real parents were gone before I even knew them. Why didn't they tell me? I managed to choke out. They wanted to protect you, Margaret said gently. You were just a baby. They couldn't bear to lose you too. So, they adopted you and decided to raise you as their own. They thought it would be easier if you never knew. I couldn't process it. My whole life, I'd believed I was John and Grace's son. But now, I felt like a stranger in my own life. Aunt Margaret squeezed my hand. Your parents love you, Lucas. They didn't want you to feel different. But they never planned for the secret to come out. I always thought they should have told you, but it wasn't my place. I nodded numbly, still trying to make sense of everything. I need to go, I said abruptly, standing up. She looked worried. Please be gentle with them. They did what they thought was best. I couldn't answer. I just needed to get out of there, to clear my head. As I walked back home, my mind raced with a million thoughts. Had Daniel known all along? Did he know that we weren't really brothers? I felt my phone buzz. It was a text from him. Hey, you okay? Mom said you've been acting weird. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Back at Mark's place, I locked myself in the spare room and tried to make sense of it. I pulled out the photo again, staring at the smiling couple holding the baby. My real parents. Tears blurred my vision as the reality sank in. I had been living a lie my entire life. But as the shocks slowly wore off, anger started to take its place. Why had they kept this from me? I had a right to know who I was. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. They owed me the truth. That night I barely slept. My mind was a storm of questions and anger. How could my parents keep something so monumental from me? Why did they lie about who I really was? I felt like a stranger in my own life. The room seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with memories that suddenly felt tainted. Everything I knew about my family had shifted, like the ground itself had moved under my feet. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work. I couldn't just hide forever. And part of me needed the distraction. Dad was already at the bakery, kneading dough like always. He greeted me with a casual, "Morning, son," and it took every ounce of strength not to snap at him. Son. The word felt hollow now. As we worked, I kept catching glimpses of him out of the corner of my eye, wondering how he could just go on like nothing had changed. Did he even remember the family I'd never known? Did he ever think about them? At one point, he noticed me staring. "Something on your mind, Lucas?" I just shook my head and mumbled, "No, just tired." But I knew I couldn't keep pretending for long. During lunch break, I slipped outside to call Daniel. When he picked up, his voice was light and carefree. "Hey, man! What's up?" I hesitated. "Can we meet up? I really need to talk." He sensed something was off. "Yeah, sure. You okay? Just meet me at the park after work." When we finally sat on the old wooden bench by the lake, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Did you know I'm adopted?" Daniel's smile faded. What are you talking about? I pulled out the photo and the birth certificate from my backpack, shoving them into his hands. He stared at them, his face pale. Where did you get this? I found it in the attic. Aunt Margaret told me everything. That Mom and Dad aren't my real parents. Daniel looked away, running his hands through his hair. I didn't know. I swear. I searched his face, looking for any hint of a lie. You really didn't know? No. They never said anything. I just always thought we were brothers. His honesty was comforting, but it didn't erase the betrayal I felt. How could they not tell me? I whispered. How could they just pretend I was theirs? Daniel put his hand on my shoulder. Maybe they were just scared of losing you. I mean, they raised you, loved you. Maybe they thought it wouldn't matter. I shook his hand off. It does matter. I have a right to know who I am. Daniel didn't argue, just nodded slowly. You're right. But you need to hear their side too. I knew he was right, but part of me didn't want to hear excuses. I wanted them to admit they'd lied to me for nearly 3 decades. Back at the bakery, I could barely make eye contact with Dad. When I finally mustered the courage to speak, my voice came out shaky. Dad, can we talk after closing? He looked at me with mild surprise. Sure, son. I hated that word now. It felt fake, like he was calling me something I wasn't. That evening, after the last customer left and the door was locked, Dad wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. What's on your mind, Lucas? I pulled out the birth certificate and set it on the counter. He froze, his face draining of color. Where did you get this? Aunt Margaret had to be the one to tell me. I said, my voice breaking. You never did. You just let me live a lie. He sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. I'd never seen Dad look so small, so defeated. We wanted to tell you, he whispered. But every time we tried, we just couldn't bring ourselves to do it. You were so little when it happened. My throat tightened. When did what happen? Dad looked up, his eyes red. Your birth parents, Thomas and Rebecca. They were our closest friends. We were driving back from a camping trip. And it was late. The roads were slick from rain. Their cars skidded off the road. John tried to get to them, but it was too late. You were crying in the back seat. Still strapped in your car seat, completely unharmed. We couldn't just let you go into the system. We loved you, Lucas. We couldn't bear to lose you too. I felt like I was suffocating. The image of that night flashed in my mind. A baby crying while his parents lay lifeless in the front seat. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something. You should have told me, I whispered. Dad wiped a tear away. We know. We wanted to, but the older you got, the harder it became. You and Daniel were so close, and we didn't want to break that bond. We thought it would be kinder to let you believe you were ours. I couldn't hold back the anger anymore. Kinder? You let me build my entire identity on a lie. Did you ever think about what it would feel like when I found out the truth? Dad's shoulders slumped, and I could see the guilt etched into his face. But it wasn't enough. You didn't just protect me, you took away my right to know who I am. You should have trusted me. You should have believed I could handle it. I could feel tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not now. Not in front of them. I just need time, I muttered, backing away before they could see me break. When I got back to Mark's, I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. My emotions swirled, grief for the parents I never knew. Anger at the parents who kept the truth from me, and guilt for feeling betrayed by the people who raised me. It wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a knot of love, fear, and misguided protection. I didn't know how to feel anymore. I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't just go back to pretending everything was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes were sore from crying, and my thoughts were tangled and messy. Mark had left a note on the kitchen counter. Went to work early. Hang in there, man. Call me if you need anything. I appreciated his support, but I knew I couldn't just hide out forever. I had to face my family, even if I wasn't ready for it. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Mom's been worried. She doesn't know what's going on. You okay? I stared at the screen, debating whether to reply. I knew I couldn't keep this from her forever. Taking a deep breath, I finally texted back. Coming over. We need to talk. When I walked into the house, Mom was at the kitchen table, peeling apples for a pie. She looked up and smiled, but her face fell when she saw mine. Lucas, honey, what's wrong? I didn't know how to start. My mouth went dry, and I could feel my hands trembling. Mom, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell me I was adopted? Her hands froze, the apple dropping onto the table. What? Who told you that? I pulled out the photo and birth certificate and placed them on the table. Her face turned ashen. She slowly sank into the chair, her hands shaking. Where did you find these? In the attic. Why didn't you tell me? Tears welled in her eyes. We always meant to. But as you got older, it just felt harder. You were so happy, so settled. We didn't want to shake your world. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Shake my world? I've been living a lie. I had the right to know where I came from. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, but I forced myself to stay focused. Why didn't you ever mention them? My real parents? Her voice was muffled through her tears. We thought it would hurt you. Thomas and Rebecca were like family to us. Losing them was unbearable. And when we looked at you, we saw them. We didn't want you to feel the pain we did. So we decided to raise you as our own, to give you a stable life, without grief. I felt like I was suffocating. But you made that decision for me. You didn't even give me a chance to know who I am. Dad walked in, stopping abruptly when he saw the scene. What's going on? Mom whispered. He knows. His eyes widened. He didn't say anything, just pulled out a chair and sat down. I couldn't contain my frustration. You both knew my whole life and never told me. You let me think I was your biological son. You took that choice away from me. Dad looked at me, his face worn and defeated. We thought we were protecting you. We thought that giving you a normal life would be better than constantly reminding you of the tragedy. But it wasn't your decision to make. I shouted. Mom sobbed harder, and Dad just sat there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Daniel, hearing the commotion, appeared in the doorway. What's going on? Why is everyone yelling? I couldn't deal with him right now. They lied to us, Daniel. I'm not really their son. I was adopted after my real parents died. His mouth fell open. Wait, what? Are you serious? I nodded, barely holding it together. They kept it from us our whole lives. Daniel looked at Mom and Dad, his expression torn between confusion and betrayal. Is that true? Dad nodded slowly. We wanted to protect you both. We didn't want Lucas to feel different. Daniel sat down, his hands on his head. Why didn't you just tell us? All these years. You always said we were brothers. I never questioned it. Mom wiped her face. We didn't want to lose Lucas. We thought, if he knew the truth, he might feel like an outsider. I couldn't believe their reasoning. You thought lying would make me feel more at home? You let me live a false life, pretending I knew where I came from. That's not love, that's manipulation. Dad tried to reach out, but I pulled back. You should have trusted me. You should have believed I could handle the truth. Instead, you built this lie and forced me to live in it. How could you do that to me? Dad's voice cracked. We didn't know how to tell you. We were scared of losing you, scared that if you knew, you wouldn't think of us as your real parents. But you're not my real parents. I snapped, regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. Dad just bowed his head, defeated. Daniel stepped between us. Lucas, come on. They raised you. They're still our parents. My voice softened. I know. But I needed the truth. You don't understand how it feels to have your entire identity ripped away. Silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating. Mom looked up, eyes red and swollen. We're so sorry, Lucas. We never meant to hurt you. We just wanted to give you the best life we could. I wanted to believe them, but the hurt was too raw. I needed space to think, to process everything. I need to go, I said quietly, pushing past Daniel. Mom's sobs followed me out the door, and I felt like the worst person in the world. But I couldn't stay there. Not now. Not after everything I'd just heard. As I walked down the familiar street, I realized that everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. My parents weren't my real parents. My childhood memories felt twisted, like they belonged to someone else. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't stay there. After leaving the house, I wandered aimlessly through town, not sure where to go or what to think. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Daniel, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. The truth was too heavy, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Eventually, I found myself at the park, the same one where I'd met Daniel a few days ago. I sat on the old wooden bench by the lake, staring at the rippling water, trying to make sense of everything. How could I ever go back to living like nothing had changed? I felt betrayed and lied to. But beneath that anger was a gnawing sense of loss. The people I thought I knew were suddenly strangers, and my entire identity felt like it had been shattered. A familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "Mind if I sit?" It was Daniel. I didn't answer, but he took a seat next to me anyway. For a while, we just sat there in silence. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't know, man. I swear. If I had, I would have told you." I sighed, running my hands through my hair. "I believe you. It's a lot to take in, you know?" He nodded. "Yeah. I can't even imagine. But they didn't do it to hurt you. They were just trying to keep you safe." I scoffed. "By lying to me my whole life?" Daniel frowned. "Sometimes people make the wrong choice for the right reasons. Doesn't make it right, but I guess they just loved you too much to risk losing you." That hit harder than I expected. I knew they loved me. Deep down, I knew. But love shouldn't mean keeping secrets that big. "I just wish they trusted me enough to tell me the truth," I whispered. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. "Maybe they didn't know how. Sometimes, when you love someone that much, you convince yourself you're doing what's best. And then, one day, it's too late to go back and do it differently." His words made sense, but it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. "I don't know what to do now," I admitted. Daniel gave me a sad smile. "You don't have to decide right now. But don't push them away forever. They really do love you, Lucas." "I know that for sure." I nodded, unsure of what my next move should be. After a while, Daniel left, giving me the space I needed. I stayed at the park until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. Eventually, I made my way back to Mark's place. He greeted me with a cautious smile. "You look like you've been through a war," he joked, trying to lighten the mood. I couldn't even muster a smile. "Feels like it." He sat down next to me on the worn-out couch. "You talked to them?" I nodded. "Yeah. They told me the whole story. My birth parents were their best friends. They died in a car accident. Mom and Dad took me in because they couldn't bear to see me go to foster care." Mark let out a low whistle. "That's heavy. You gonna be okay?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I feel like I've been living a lie. Like my whole life isn't even mine." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "But it is yours, Lucas. Just because they didn't tell you the truth doesn't mean your life wasn't real. They raised you. They loved you. That part's not fake." That struck a chord. I had been so caught up in the betrayal that I forgot about the good parts. The nights when Mom stayed up with me when I was sick, Dad teaching me how to ride a bike. Daniel always stands up for me at school. It didn't erase the hurt, but it did remind me that love was still there, even if it was tangled up with mistakes and bad choices. I spent the night thinking it over. In the morning, I decided to go back home. Not to forgive them outright, but to at least talk. When I walked in, Mom was sitting at the table, staring blankly at her cup of tea. She looked up, eyes red and puffy. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice full of both relief and fear. I sat down across from her. "I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not saying I'm not angry. But I'm here. I want to understand why you couldn't trust me with the truth." Mom took a shaky breath. "We should have told you, but every time we tried, it felt impossible. You were so little, and we wanted to protect you. Then, as you got older, it seemed too late to bring it up. We didn't want you to feel like you didn't belong." Dad walked in, his face heavy with guilt. "We were wrong, Lucas. You deserve to know. We just didn't want to lose you." My voice cracked. "You didn't lose me. You just made me feel like I never belonged. I needed to know who I was. You should have given me that chance." Mom sobbed quietly, and Dad wiped at his eyes. "We love you," he said, his voice thick. "No matter what, you are our son." I couldn't deny the love in his words, even if the betrayal still lingered. I know, I replied, my own tears finally breaking free. But you need to understand that it's going to take time for me to process this. They both nodded, grateful that I hadn't completely shut them out. We didn't resolve everything that night, but it was a start. We sat around the table, just talking, about me, about them, about the people I never knew. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe, one day, I could find a way to forgive them. The days that followed felt like a slow, emotional recovery. I didn't go back to Mark's place, I stayed at home, but everything felt different. It was like seeing my family through a distorted lens. I'd catch myself watching Mom as she cooked breakfast, noticing how her movements seemed more hesitant. Like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Dad stayed quiet most of the time, avoiding eye contact. As if any conversation might bring up the truth we were all trying to navigate. Daniel checked on me constantly, making sure I wasn't brooding too much. One evening, he dragged me out to our favorite burger joint. We sat at the cracked vinyl booth, munching on fries and barely talking. Eventually, he broke the silence. "Are you ever going to forgive them?" he asked, his tone cautious. I sighed, staring at the ketchup smudged on my plate. "I don't know. I want to. But it's hard to forget that they lied to me for so long." Daniel nodded. "Yeah. I can't imagine what that feels like. But dude, they're trying. I've never seen Dad look so beaten down. I think they're scared you'll never trust them again." I thought about that. I couldn't deny that seeing Dad so vulnerable had shaken me. He'd always been this steady, reliable presence, and now he looked like a man carrying too much regret. I took a deep breath. I just need time. I don't want to hate them. I really don't. But every time I look at them, I feel betrayed. Like I wasn't important enough to be told the truth. Daniel leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head. "You know, sometimes I think they were just scared of losing you. Maybe they thought telling you would make you feel like you didn't belong. But they should have known better. Your family, no matter what." He was right. Despite everything, they had loved me, raised me, and made sacrifices for me. That part wasn't a lie. But the truth they'd kept hidden had reshaped my sense of who I was. A few days later, I found myself sorting through the attic again. This time, I wasn't looking for more secrets. I was looking for answers. I found an old box labeled Thomas and Rebecca, in Dad's careful handwriting. Inside were photos of them, my birth parents, smiling, holding hands, laughing at some long-forgotten joke. They looked so happy, so carefree. My throat tightened. I felt a pang of grief for people I couldn't remember but somehow missed. There was also a small notebook. Flipping through, I realized it was Rebecca's journal. The entries were short, often just notes about their day or things to buy. But one page stood out. It was a list of baby names. And at the top, circled and underlined, Lucas. I traced the letters with my finger, feeling an unexpected connection to her. My name wasn't just something my parents chose, it was something they preserved for me. Downstairs, I showed the journal to Mom. She looked at it with trembling hands, a bittersweet smile on her lips. "They loved you so much," she whispered. I hesitated before asking, "Why did you keep all this hidden?" Her eyes glistened with tears. "We couldn't bear to look at it sometimes. After we lost them, we just put it away. We didn't know how to tell you without reopening the pain." I could understand that. They weren't just protecting me, they were protecting themselves from reliving that grief. It didn't make the lie right, but it made it more human. For the first time, I didn't feel just anger. I felt sadness, compassion, and a flicker of understanding. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the journal. About the life I could have had and the life I did have. I realized that both sets of parents loved me in their own way. One gave me life, and the other gave me a home. Both were important, and both were part of who I was. Maybe that was the hardest part to accept, that I wasn't just one person with one story. I was a combination of love, loss, and choices that weren't mine to make. I spent more time at home after that. We didn't talk about the adoption constantly, but when we did, it felt a little less tense each time. I told them about finding the journal, and Mom admitted she had almost thrown it away once. Too hurt to keep it. But something stopped her. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was love. Either way, I was grateful she hadn't. One evening, As we sat together in the living room, Dad finally spoke up. "I'm proud of you, Lucas. You've handled all of this better than I could have. I know it's going to take time, but we're not going anywhere. We'll wait for as long as you need." It was a simple statement, but it meant the world to me. I didn't have to decide everything at once. I didn't have to forgive them immediately. But knowing they were willing to be patient made the path forward seem a bit clearer. I still didn't know when I would fully come to terms with the truth. But I did know that moving forward meant acknowledging both the pain and the love intertwined in my story. And that meant giving my parents a chance to prove that I still belong, not because of a bloodline, but because of the life we had built together. A few weeks had passed since I first uncovered the truth about my adoption. Things were slowly starting to feel more normal, but it was a new kind of normal. One where the unspoken truth now lingered around every conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the silence and tension from before. We were finding our footing again, step by careful step. One Saturday morning, Dad came into my room, holding a photo album. He hesitated at the door. "Can I come in?" "Yeah," I replied, sitting up on my bed. He sat down next to me and opened the album. "These are from when we first brought you home," he said, pointing to a photo of me as a baby in his arms. His face was younger, softer, filled with a pride I hadn't noticed before. "I remember that day like it was yesterday," he continued. "We didn't know what we were doing. We were terrified. But when you grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go, I knew we'd made the right choice. You needed us, and we needed you." Hearing him speak so openly was both comforting and painful. "Why didn't you ever show me these before?" I asked. He looked down, guilt clouding his expression. "We were afraid you'd start asking questions. Questions we weren't ready to answer." I nodded, understanding even if I didn't fully agree. "We didn't want you to feel different," he added. "But I was different," I said softly. "I always felt it. I just didn't know why." Dad's shoulders slumped. "I know. We should have trusted you to understand. We thought we were protecting you, but we were really protecting ourselves from the truth." The honesty in his words made the knot in my chest loosen a little. "I'm still angry," I admitted. "But I'm trying to see it from your side. I needed to know where I came from. That doesn't mean I love you any less." Dad smiled faintly, his eyes misty. "We never doubted your love. We just didn't know how to handle our own fears." That afternoon, I decided to take a step forward. I called Aunt Margaret. She was relieved to hear from me, probably worried I'd shut her out after our last conversation. "I've been thinking about them a lot," I said, referring to my birth parents. "I want to know more about them. Do you think you could help?" She agreed without hesitation, suggesting we meet at her place the next day. When I arrived, she had laid out more photos, letters, and keepsakes she'd kept over the years. I was surprised to see how much she'd saved. "This was from their wedding," she said, holding up a photo of Thomas and Rebecca smiling under a makeshift arch. "They were so happy that day. And when they found out Rebecca was pregnant with you, I don't think I'd ever seen them more excited." I couldn't help but smile. Hearing about them from someone who knew them made it feel more real. Like they weren't just names on a piece of paper anymore. Margaret handed me a small, weathered box. "They left this for you. Your parents kept it for years, not knowing when or if they'd give it to you." Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes, a silver locket, and a handwritten letter. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. It was a letter from Rebecca, written shortly before I was born. She talked about how much they were looking forward to meeting me. How they already loved me more than anything in the world. My vision blurred as I read the last lines. "No matter what happens, we want you to know you were wanted, loved, and cherished. Our greatest hope is that you grow up happy and know that you are always loved." I wiped my eyes, grateful that Margaret let me have this moment without interrupting. When I finally looked up, she was smiling gently. "They were good people," she said. "And they would be proud of the man you've become." For the first time since I found out the truth, I felt a sense of peace. My birth parents had loved me, even if I couldn't remember them. And my adoptive parents loved me too, despite their mistakes. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was mine. When I got home, Mom was baking cookies, her way of coping with stress. I walked up and hugged her from behind, surprising both of us. She tensed for a moment before melting into the embrace. "I talked to Aunt Margaret," I said. She showed me some things. I think I'm starting to understand. Mom sniffled, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm so sorry, Lucas. I know we can't change the past. But we're here to help you learn about them. Whatever you need. I smiled, still feeling a bit of the old hurt but also relief. Maybe we can look through those old photos together, I suggested. Her eyes lit up. I'd like that. As we sat on the living room floor later that evening, going through albums and sharing stories, I felt a warmth growing inside me. My parents weren't perfect, and they had made a huge mistake. But they were still my family, flawed, complicated, but undeniably mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a stranger in my own life. I felt like Lucas, the boy loved by two families, raised by one, and shaped by both. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't be for a while, but we were healing. And that was enough for now. Rebuilding trust wasn't something that happened overnight. After that emotional breakthrough with my parents, there were still days when the anger resurfaced. When I'd look at them and feel a flash of resentment. But I was trying. They were too. We were slowly finding a new way to be a family. One that didn't rely on pretending everything was fine. One Sunday afternoon, while I was helping Dad in the backyard, he handed me a pair of pruning shears. We hadn't really talked about the adoption since that night. He seemed hesitant, almost like he was walking on eggshells. After a while, he cleared his throat. You know, I've been thinking about what you said, about how we took away your choice. You were right. We did. I thought loving you enough would make up for it. I didn't know what to say, so I just kept trimming the hedge. I guess I was afraid. He continued, his voice softer. Afraid that if you knew, you'd feel like you didn't belong. And I couldn't stand the thought of you feeling unwanted. I finally spoke, trying to keep my voice steady. I never felt unwanted. Just confused. It was like I always knew something was off. I just couldn't figure out what. He nodded, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. That's on us. We let our fear keep you in the dark. You deserve better. The sincerity in his words made me pause. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, I admitted. But it's going to take time to get past this. Dad gave me a sad smile. I'll wait. As long as it takes. A few evenings later, Mom found me in the living room, sorting through some of the photos Aunt Margaret had given me. She sat down quietly, glancing at the picture of Thomas and Rebecca holding baby me. They were so proud of you, she whispered. I didn't respond at first. I was still trying to wrap my head around it all. Why did you keep those photos hidden? I finally asked. Her face softened with guilt. It hurt too much to look at them. When we lost them, it was like we lost a part of ourselves. Having you fill that hole, but it didn't erase the pain. We wanted to move on, and keeping their things around felt too much like holding on to the past. I could see her logic, even if I didn't fully agree with it. Sometimes I wish you'd let me know them through those stories. It wouldn't have changed how I felt about you. Maybe it would have made me feel more whole. Mom wiped a tear away. I see that now. I'm so sorry. Her voice broke, and I put my hand over hers. I'm not saying I don't love you. I just needed the truth. I needed to know who I was. She squeezed my hand tightly. We love you. Nothing's going to change that. One evening, Daniel came by with a surprise. I've been digging through some of the old stuff in the garage, he said, pulling out a dusty shoebox. Look what I found. Inside were more old photos, including some I hadn't seen before. There was one of me and Daniel as kids, covered in mud, grinning like little monsters. Another showed Dad teaching us both how to fish at the lake. And then, near the bottom, was a photo I'd never seen. Thomas, Rebecca, John, and Grace all together, holding me and Daniel as babies. I hadn't realized they'd been that close. Daniel looked at me seriously. They didn't just love you because they felt responsible. They loved you because you were already family to them. I looked at the photo again, this time seeing it differently. It wasn't just a picture of loss. It was proof that I had been loved from the start. That the people who raised me did so not out of obligation but out of a deep, genuine bond. Something about that realization made me feel lighter. A few days later, we decided to have a family dinner, a chance to just be together without the weight of the past hanging over us. I offered to cook, surprising everyone. As we sat around the table, passing dishes and laughing at Daniel's jokes, I realized that this, The four of us sharing a meal felt right. It wasn't perfect, and the scars of the betrayal were still there. But we were choosing to move forward. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside. I was thinking, he said. Maybe one day, when you're ready, we could visit their graves. Pay our respects. It might help you feel more connected to them. I hadn't thought about that. Visiting the graves of people I couldn't remember. But part of me knew he was right. I needed to acknowledge where I came from, all parts of it. I'd like that, I replied. He smiled, patting my shoulder. Whenever you're ready. That night, I sat in my room, looking through the old photos one more time. I knew the pain of the past wouldn't just disappear, but I was finally starting to understand that I didn't have to choose one family over the other. Both were a part of me. One gave me life, and the other gave me a home. I had been hurt, but I had also been loved. It wasn't as simple as forgiveness, but it was a start. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like I could breathe again. A month had passed since the night I confronted my parents about the truth. Life had slowly settled into a new rhythm, one where I wasn't constantly questioning my past. It still stung sometimes, the realization that I'd been kept in the dark for so long. But I'd begun to accept that my parents had made a mistake out of love, not malice. It didn't make it right, but it made it easier to forgive. One evening, I sat down with Dad in the living room while Mom prepared dinner. It was quiet, just the two of us, and I knew it was time to have one final conversation. Dad, I started, unsure of how to phrase it. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About the past and what you did. He put down his book, giving me his full attention. I know it's going to take time, he said gently. And I don't expect you to just forget what happened. I nodded. I know you did it because you loved me. But keeping that secret, it made me question everything for a while. Who I was. Where I belong. Dad looked down, guilt etched on his face. I never wanted you to feel that way. We thought giving you a normal life would be better than constantly reminding you of a loss you couldn't remember. I took a deep breath. It's not about forgetting where I came from. It's about knowing. I needed to know the truth to feel whole. Now that I do, it's easier to understand why you did it. He looked up, hopeful. Does that mean you can forgive us? It means I'm working on it, I replied honestly. Dad gave a small, relieved smile. That's more than I could have asked for. We sat in companionable silence after that, just letting the weight of the past finally ease off our shoulders. A few days later, we made the trip to the cemetery. It was just me, Dad, and Aunt Margaret. When we arrived at the gravestones of Thomas and Rebecca, I felt a wave of sadness and longing for people I never got to know. Margaret handed me a small bouquet of wildflowers. They loved these, she said. Rebecca always had a vase full on the windowsill. I knelt down, placing the flowers at the base of the headstones. I'm sorry I didn't know you, I whispered, my throat tight. But I promise I'll remember you now. I'll honor the life you gave me. Margaret placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. They would be so proud of you, Lucas. You're everything they hoped you would become. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded, letting the quiet settle around us. Dad stayed a respectful distance back, giving me space. I appreciated that he wasn't trying to intrude on this moment. He knew it wasn't about him right now. It was about me finding closure. On the drive home, Dad broke the silence. You know, visiting them like that, it makes me realize how lucky we were to have you. Losing Thomas and Rebecca it broke us. But you gave us a reason to keep going. I looked out the window, trying to hide my emotions. I guess I always felt like something was missing. Now that I know the truth, it's like I can finally let it go. He nodded, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. We should have trusted you to handle it. I know that now. But I'm grateful you're willing to give us another chance. I couldn't help but smile a little. You're still my dad. That didn't change. He looked at me, eyes misty, and just said, Thank you. Back at home, I found Mom in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. She turned around, surprised to see me smiling. You look peaceful, she observed. I nodded. I think I am. Visiting them helped. It made me realize that I can love both families without losing myself. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy ones. That's all I ever wanted for you, she whispered. I wrapped my arms around her, letting the hug speak more than words could. We stayed like that for a while, just letting love do the healing. Later that night, Daniel and I hung out on the back porch, sharing a couple of beers. He raised his bottle in a mock toast to complicated families and finding peace. I laughed. I'll drink to that. He took a sip and leaned back. You know, you're still my brother. Nothing about that changed, no matter what anyone says. I smiled. I know. I guess I just needed to hear it again. As the stars came out, I realized that my family wasn't perfect. But they were mine, both the family I was born into and the one that raised me. I didn't have to choose between them anymore. I could embrace both parts of my life, honoring my birth parents while also appreciating the parents who gave me a home. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. Moving forward wouldn't be easy, but I was done hiding from the truth. As I sat with my brother under the night sky, I realized that family isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, even when it's hard. And for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe.